Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 7 of 12 Days of Workforce Wisdom, Reflections, Realities, and Resets to wrap 2025 and power 2026. Sitting across from me is another return guest, one that I am very delighted to have here and am grateful for the time that they afforded the Trap Chat audience to be here. You probably recognize this person. They are a national legal analyst on MS Now, as well as a civil rights attorney, curator of Black Brilliance, coming to us live from Brooklyn Beach, Charles Coleman Jr. How are you?
So glad to be with you. Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to be back. And congrats to you on these 12 days of workforce wisdom. It is not an easy endeavor. So good to see you doing it. And thank you for having me.
Thank you. And no, it's not an easy endeavor, and it is not something that I didn't think was going to be this difficult. But we're a little bit past the halfway mark. So let's get right into it with some reflections. Reflecting on 2025, what stood out to you as the most defining workplace justice issues, and how did those moments reshape the national conversation around workplace equity?
Well, I think the clear answer has to be the finalized attack on DEI. I think the last time that you and I spoke on this platform, you asked me, was DEI dead? And I said it wasn't dead, but it was in hospice. And what we saw from the top of the year until now is this administration, with aid of other government entities, as well as the courts in some regards, have effectively pulled the plug. For a number of us, we predicted that this was possible and that it was likely going to come. I think the swiftness of its impact on the workforce, when you combine with respect to things like DOGE and what DOGE was doing to the federal sector, and then what the notion of removing DEI meant for the private sector, had a devastating effect at a very, very high rate. I think the one sort of caveat here that I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later is that doesn't necessarily change what certain anti-discrimination laws protect us from in the workplace. And so we have taken the removal of DEI as to be a sort of free-for-all for employers to do whatever they want and run rampant in terms of creating workspaces that are hostile, workspaces that are illegal, workspaces that are discriminatory. And those are still protected items for many of us. And I think it's important to understand that we not throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, in dismissing the idea that we have no legal protections in the workforce, despite the fact that DEI has effectively been removed.
Wow. Thank you for that, and for adding that a little bit of context for us. As both a civil rights attorney and a DICE champion, DICE being diversity, inclusion, culture, and equity, what misunderstandings did you see leaders and employees continue to have about what meaningful equity work actually requires?
Well, I think, the conversation, Kirsten, was one that really exposed what some ugly truths were about workplaces, because as I have explained, sort of DICE as a trademarked idea, if you will, DICE is really diversity. The D in DICE is diversity, which is basically, what do I see if I walk around your workplace and I don't know anything about what anyone does, just who's represented if I look at your workplace. Inclusion is about who's at the table, who is being able to participate in these conversations, and who is able to be a part of certain decision-making processes. So you can have a diverse workplace that's not very inclusive. And then equity. What are the rules of that workplace? Do the rules work differently for some people than they do others? And in some cases, there's going to be inequity based off of where people sit and what people do and what their backgrounds are. And then culture is whatever the glue is that ties all this together and what the sauce ends up tasting like at the end of the day. But with respect to equity, it's very interesting that what I found more and more is that people really had to be clear about the fact that if you were on the other side of DEI, you weren't necessarily invested in an equitable workforce. Like, you may not have actually believed in that. And that became increasingly obvious when the lines were drawn between people who were willing to fight for DEI and people who sort of let it go very, very easily, because some of those people never really wanted the idea of an equitable workforce to begin with. I also think that the narrative around DEI and equity in workplaces was significantly distorted. It was distorted, and I blame powerful communications on certain sectors and an absence of strong messaging from other sections to allow this to happen. But at one point, DEI was misnomered to basically suggest that it was giving opportunities to people who weren't qualified. And that was the worst thing that could have happened, because it allowed that narrative to exist in a way where people felt like, well, that's not fair, which, if taken on its face, possibly could seem that way. But it's a lot more. First of all, that's not what it was at all, ever. And you understand that as a recruiter, of course, and everything that you do as the trap recruiter. But it really did accelerate the resistance and the opposition to DEI in a way that led us to the point we are now.
So, as usual, I'm on mute.
I lost you.
I was starting talking.
I was starting to work on my lip reading.
Yeah, that's a harsh reality, is what I was saying when I was on mute. As we move into the reality section of our conversation, you alluded to it, but we have seen a growing tension between legal risk management and organizations' stated commitments to equity. What are the real world challenges that workers are facing, especially those of us from historically excluded and underrepresented groups, facing as companies are full on retreating from DEI?
Well, I think people are looking at the opposition or yielding or capitulating to the opposition against DEI as sort of reading the tea leaves about how ardent is your company or your employer's stance in creating a workplace that feels inclusive, where you feel like you belong. And if you are someone who exists in a workspace where they were quick to do away with DEI, or they did away with DEI without much fanfare or opposition, or even sort of surveying the workplace to understand how its workforce felt about it, it is easy to believe that they also are co-signing on a certain degree of discrimination and anti-sentiments when it comes to how people should feel when they come to work. It's easy to sort of conflate the two or to make that jump. And I think that a lot of people are feeling that. They're feeling like this is a message that was sent as somewhat of a dog whistle about the fact that ultimately I'm not necessarily wanted here or desired here. And the fact that I may still have a job even after the DEI cuts or the elimination of DEI for this workspace is something that I should take note of, because in this sort of economy, I don't know that I want to be a job seeker. I don't know that I want to be out here looking right. And I think people who come from underrepresented communities are keenly aware of this reality. Yeah. And so they exist in a space where they're getting the message or they're interpreting a particular message, but they're also considering that if they still do have a job, this is not the time to try to push back, even though they might be right, if only for the fact that they can't afford to be out here without employment in this sort of economy.
All right, let's step away from your day job and get a little bit personal. You provide a great deal of legal analysis, but you're usually the one that's asking questions. So I want to get your take on something, like I said, that's a little bit personal. For those who don't know, you have successfully navigated a notable career pivot from prosecutor, civil rights attorney, to, as I said at the top of the show, a national legal analyst and a DICE consultant. among other things, podcast host, 2 shows, Charles Coleman podcast, and the Brothers Briefing with Richard Fowler.
Yes, with Richard Fowler.
Thank you. Okay. So, what truths have you learned about reinvention, and how should professionals evaluate when it's time to pivot or expand their lane?
Well, I got to give credit to someone who I've sort of put on as an adopted mentor. She will forever be my boss lady in terms of media, and that is Rashida Jones, who for me introduced me to the term of portfolio lifestyle. And a portfolio lifestyle, I think, is where a number of us in the workforce at whatever level and whatever capacity will move into. And that is, you end up being able to make a living and establish a career by drawing on a number of different opportunities. People used to call them streams of income. I mean, you could still use that term, but that capitalize on the different facets of who you are identity-wise and what your gifts are. And I think that it, for me, came to a point where I began to actually listen to the advice of a number of folks around me who were telling me that I needed to lean into some of the things that I wasn't doing. Okay. When you are in a 9-to-5, and you work in 9-to-5 space after 9-to-5 space for someone else, oftentimes you will resolve to limit the expression of your multitude of skill sets to just whatever is necessary to complete that job. And this is not encouraging everyone to necessarily walk away from their 9-to-5 and become an entrepreneur, because that's not how everyone is built. However, when it comes to building your portfolio, you may still have your 9-to-5, but there are still other skill sets that you have an opportunity to lean into and figure out, how do I have, or where are the opportunities for me to sort of actualize some of my potential around this? Because these are things that I enjoy doing and I do well, and I believe add value in a way that I can monetize. For me personally, I felt like there was so much that I wasn't able to capitalize on about my gifts and the things that I wanted to do and was capable of doing at a high level. And I realized that the truth was I was never going to be able to reach that place working for someone else and doing what I was doing at the same time. I realized that the only space that was going to allow me to thrive in a multitude of gifts was the space that I created for myself. And so that was the step. That was the first step of realization. The other step from a pivot standpoint was really just being open to different opportunities and not necessarily having a design that so structurally wed me from one thing to the next, but allowing my gifts to sort of take me where I needed to go and we needed to be, and leaning into what felt right. And the last and probably most important piece, without a question, a lot of prayer and a lot of faith, because this was not the pivot that I had in mind for myself by any stretch of the imagination. I never saw myself or set out to be someone who was on national television and as a legal analyst. In fact, I came from the Brooklyn DA's office, and that's also the former home of Star Jones. Star Jones is a Brooklyn DA alum. When I was at the Brooklyn DA's office, I remember thinking, how in the hell did she get here? I had no idea. I remember thinking, like, how in the world did she do that?
Okay.
It seems so improbable. And here it is, lo and behold, I'm on TV, another alum from the Brooklyn DA's office on national television, because I ended up being willing to lean into those gifts. And so even though this was not the pivot that I anticipated or planned, being flexible enough and being willing to step into those gifts has paid a tremendous amount of dividends.
Awesome. And I just want to thank you as a Black woman for shouting out specifically to Black women who have been integral in the way that your career is continuing to evolve and shape. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
No, and without a doubt. I mean, as I look at my career, I have had the benefit of a number of relationships and support systems that have had Black men at the center of them. And so I won't deny the ways that has been uplifting. And, I've never been one to sit and do an actual tally. But what I will say, Kirsten, is that it is undeniable that some of the biggest wins, when I look back over my life and my professional career in particular, some of the biggest wins have come at the help, at the aid, at the support, at the cosign of Black women. And so I'll be the first to acknowledge that. Like I said, I'm not a tit for tat end of the measure guy in terms of looking at the ledger. But what I will say undeniably is that my experience has been, Black women have been tremendously helpful in showing up and helping me move forward and navigate the different career pivots in my life.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. All right, let's move on to the reset. You often talk about resilience and rejection. As we wrap 2025, how should people re-examine their relationship with the word no? And what mindset shift turns a no from a barrier into an entryway?
So the second question is a little bit more challenging, but perhaps it will make sense when you consider the answer to the first question.
Okay.
All right. Let's first and foremost accept or establish a few premises that are keenly important to understanding this answer. The first premise that we've got to establish, and you can feel free to push back on me on this, but the first premise that we've got to establish is that successful people are likely told no much more often than they're told yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. So for anybody who's watching this and may not understand, I want you to think about this. Successful people are not successful because they never get told no. In fact, they often get told no. They get told no a whole lot. Mm-hmm. The difference is they keep going. That's what makes them successful, is that they end up finding success because they continue to go forward, whereas the person who got told the no stopped. All right, so that's the first part of the premise that we've got to accept. The second part of the premise is that in terms of being told no, if you want to be successful, you have to be willing to ask for things. You have to be willing. Like the idea that you would sort of just do work, be good at it, or be average at it, or not be good at it at all, sit back, do work, and expect that just stuff just happens. You don't ask anybody for help to learn how to get better. You don't ask anybody for help to learn where you should be doing the work that you're doing, or how you should be doing the work that you should be doing, or in front of who should you be doing the work that you should be. If you don't, asking for something as simple as advice, not even opportunity, right? So the second part of the premise is success requires that we ask for something and be okay asking for things. Can you accept that?
I mean, yes, as a person, will I practice that? Probably not as often as I should.
Okay. And that's understandable.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, we all have things that we realize are challenges for us reaching the type of success that we may want. And then we have things that we don't even know are challenges that, stand in our way. And so the fact that you're like, oh, I know this, it doesn't necessarily feel good. It's not something I'm as comfortable with as I need to be.
Yeah.
It's understandable and it's honest, right? It's honest. But we do agree that you're making things harder for yourself in terms of reaching success when you have a hesitancy about asking for things.
Sure. Allegedly. No, I'm teasing. No, I am hard-headed and I am not a person who is comfortable asking for things. So yes.
Okay. So you have those two premises, right? You got to ask for stuff and you're going to get no more than yes.
Okay.
All right. So if you accept those two premises, I want you to think about no in the following way. The only reason why no is a bad thing for us is because we think of it in terms of being like the unknown, the variable, the thing that we sort of are not sure about how much of it is there. If we understood on the front end, if I said to you, hey, listen, you want this project to take off, you want this thing, you're going to have to hear no 15 times before you get to yes. But when you get to yes, you'll be successful. How upset would you be about getting your third no?
I'm going to be motivated to get to 15 as quickly as possible.
There you go. And that means you're going to have to ask for things.
Yes.
And that means you're going to have to be okay told no. And that also means that you know that if you're getting told no, two things are happening. You're getting, if you keep getting told no, then that means A, you're still going, and B, you're asking for stuff. And so that means you're just getting closer to success, because if you're like, I got 13 no's to go, I need to go find where these no's are so I can get to my yes, you would look at it very differently. The issue is that we, you know, the game doesn't give us the answer in the beginning where we know how many no's we got to go through. That's the faith part. The faith part is, I don't know how many no's I got left, but I know I got to be getting closer. And so I'm going to keep asking, and I'm going to keep going.
I like that. That's a word. That was a word. And as someone who tells other people, I'm one of those people who do as I like, not to be bossy, but you know, I'm one of those people that no, I give great advice, like, but I don't always take that same advice. So no is not a bad word to me. I look at it as next opportunity. I even have shirts and cups and all kinds of stuff to remind me that no is.
I wore next opportunity. I wore your no shirt when I first was on the show.
Yeah, you did. You did. Thank you. I forgot about that. So yes, but the added things that you mentioned about having to ask for things, it's a matter of getting to the no. Like, I understand, get to the no as quickly as possible, but that also requires you to do some things that may make you feel uncomfortable. So I appreciate you dropping those gems.
And if you're not willing, you know, I don't want to be the sort of like difficult coach in the room, but like, if you're not willing to go through some no's for something that you allegedly want, how bad did you really want it?
You don't.
Because if it was easy for you to get, then everybody would have it.
Ooh. That's
and
good.
then and if it was easy for you to get, then everybody would have it. And what's worse about that is, and then nobody would want it. So, you know, think through these things when you are setting out. If you have the impetus for an idea or for a destination, and you have designated something that's worthy of your time, truly worthy of your time, your energy, and your effort, there's a reason for that. And so if you believed in it enough to get started with it, then you should really give it your best shot. And that is going to mean going through a whole bunch of no's to find where your yes is.
I love that. You just gave us a bunch of wisdom, but I'm going to be greedy and ask you one more wisdom question, but it's a little bit of a pivot. So as we power into 2026, what is one piece of year-end wisdom you would give to justice-minded individuals and organizations to navigate conflict, create accountability, and build workplaces rooted in fairness and humanity?
That's a good question. And I'm going to go very, very, very practical and sort of end where I began. It's important in this environment that people still understand that there are, especially in the workplace, existing anti-discrimination laws which can and should be upheld. the fact that your workplace and your employer may have decided to strip things of DEI does not at all absolve them of something that becomes a hostile or discriminatory workplace. And so you don't have to endure any sort of racial taunts, discrimination, excessive discomfort that comes from pervasive or severe acts such that you would be in a hostile work environment just because they've eliminated DEI. Do not allow that to be the case. In many respects, there are bad actors out there who want people to believe that they have no redress, that they have no recourse, that they have no protection. And that is not the truth. The truth is that DEI was, in a lot of ways, an evolved sort of attempt at really leveling the workplace. But the anti-discrimination laws, that's the baseline. And so they don't have, they being management, employers, things of that nature, they don't have the ability to summarily subject us to things that are in violation of the law. And you should stand firmly on that if you need to. And remember that even as you may be in a workplace that has said it doesn't want to be equitable or inclusive, you do not have to tolerate a workplace that is discriminatory or hostile.
Thank you for that, for those words of wisdom. And I can say this for him, even though he didn't say it, that is not legal advice, but it is legal advice.
It's not legal advice.
You are qualified, because I'm saying this because you are qualified to provide legal advice. However, it's not legal advice, but it's legal advice.
It's not legal advice, but it is information given by a lawyer. Yes,
there you go. Okay, thank you. Before I let you go, I do have to ask some holiday questions because this is a holiday series. What is your favorite holiday tradition?
So my mom's family is from Memphis. I think that the favorite holiday tradition was probably the sort of, by the time that, there was a point where more or less most of us were adult age and we weren't necessarily playing the Santa Claus game anymore. But the on Christmas Eve was a really rocking good time. Like, people would have a good time. I would make some chili because most of the women in the family were concentrated on Christmas dinner, and so I would make chili that night for the family to eat, and we would just sort of hang out and wrap gifts, and people would go to little corners of the house and wrap their gifts for everybody and all of that. And so that tradition of what Christmas Eve was, as kind of like a little mini party, was always a good time.
Okay. And last but not least, you're probably going to go with what everyone else said. Do you make New Year's resolutions? And if so, do you have a unique one you'd like to share for 2026?
I do not make resolutions.
No one does.
I do focus on themes.
Okay.
I have not thought through what my theme of 2026 is yet, but for people who are wondering what does that mean, a theme for me in the past, one of them has been compassion. Okay. Thinking through what it is to be a more compassionate individual, to think about showing compassion, to look at situations with a greater degree of compassion and understanding. All of those things were things that went into that theme. So I tend to think of themes around the new year in those terms, and will probably reach my 2026 theme in the next week or so, because that's when it'll be time.
All right. Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I do not take it for granted, and I do not say that lightly. Thank you for affording us your wisdom. And I hope everyone else comes back for day 8, I think we'll be on, 12 days of workforce wisdom, reflections, realities, and resets to wrap 2025, Empower 2026. Thanks again, Charles.
Thank you, Kirsten, for having me. Again, congratulations. Happy holidays and Happy New Year to you.
All right. Bye-bye.